you guys had a bunch of questions about commentary, and I was very curious on what they were because, of course, trying to build out the library of resources that we got on commentary, as you can see in the tweet over here. And I don't know, I wanted ideas. I was like, I've been commentating for almost 3 years now, and it would be good to kind of share some of that knowledge, but I don't know what people want to know, right? Like maybe certain things are obvious to people who, even are outside of commentary, and maybe some things that I have learned and take for granted are like, I don't even know, right? Like we forget what we didn't know early on, right? It's very easy to forget what things you learned as a beginner and have kind of taken for granted ever since. So thankfully you guys were very active about giving me a bunch of responses on things that you find interesting or that you would like to know for commentary. So let's scroll on through. I've already answered a bunch of them with some shorter answers, but these don't really do it justice, if only because Twitter only has 280 characters. So let's go for a little bit more detailed of some questions here, right? Or detailed answers, rather, is what I'm trying to give here. So we have one from Chado, defeat after, a big TM Opera stan. And I love that for him. So his question is, how do you even get a start? The line of work I'm in constantly has me announcing stuff, and I've always felt the want to commentate my favorite games. But it seems like there's an initial barrier to get started. Well, I kind of talk about it here, and also in this thread as well, which is, some tips on getting into FGC commentary. And I break it down a little bit more here. But in general, I mean, this answer is pretty concise as well. So you choose 1 or 2 games that you want to commentate, because I think doing more than that, even me, almost 3 years into commentary, I find it hard to kind of branch out and try and learn multiple things at the same time. So 1, 2 max, I think, especially as you're starting out, gives you a lot of room to not only learn, deeper about your game and find out how to be able to communicate that to others, but also just learning some of the commentary soft skills, right? Like doing Matcherino shills, doing ad reads, those are kind of the same thing. Building up synergy with your co-commentator. So many of these things that are, applicable and transferable skills when you decide to learn other games down the line. But especially if you're not already like, high or like top level in your game, it's, I think, best to try and like hone down what you're trying to improve on. So that way you have a lot of extra room, kind of in the mental stack to focus on like, okay, how do I make my commentary better? Like if I know this game already, how can I do a better job of communicating that knowledge to the people that are listening while working well with my co-commentator? So, having clean handoffs, making sure that I'm not stepping on their toes and cutting them off as well, and, bringing out the best in them. And then also just having fun on commentary as well. So choose a couple games. And then as far as getting started, like usually locals are pretty open with who they have on the mic, as long as you're, not saying silly or inflammatory things, like you have a general decorum about you. And kind of same for online as well. And especially with the rise of a lot of net play stuff, in the past few years, especially with Strive rollback, getting so many net play tournaments because, COVID required us to have good net play to play online. And now this has kind of, been a standard that has expanded to the rest of the other main games on the roster. If you have a game or two that you want to get better at, you can usually just reach out to netplay TOs and be like, hey, I'm trying to get more experience in commentary. If you have any experience, you can list it or send them timestamps as well. But, a lot of them are very receptive to someone being eager to learn commentary for them. Yeah. Then you build up your experience, preferably you review, find one thing that you want to improve in between each of those blocks. And yeah, you repeat until you build up a little resume and skills. And then you have enough to make your reel. Here's a tricky one. So at what point can you confidently say that you're good at commentary? So this is definitely one of the questions that I wanted to expand on more, but I didn't want to put like a whole thread in my replies. But saying that you're good at commentary is hard, right? Because you have to be self-aware enough to be like, okay, am I am I actually good, or do I have like an inflated sense of my own skill, right? Like, how do I know the difference between the two? And kind of like I mentioned in the reply as well, right? Ira Glass has this really good concept of your taste versus your ability, right? And it's kind of this graph. I wish I had a visual of it. Let me find it on the side because I think it's really going to help the example. Taste, or Ira Glass taste graph. Let's see. Surely someone has this, right? Okay. There we go. So we have... Yeah, exactly. So something I didn't note in the thread, but I would have liked to, is the concept of like artist highs and artist lows. So your taste or your observation skills is what they call it here. Oh, let me move my webcam. Or can I just open link in new tab? Open image in new tab? There we go. This is better. So your taste or your observation skills is constantly improving. And at some point, right, there was a time when you were inspired to do commentary, but you had never done anything, right? So you had no skills. You had no artistic skills or no ability. But your taste is what inspired you to start commentary, right? So eventually, as you do things, your ability is going to catch up to your taste and maybe even exceed it, right? But then eventually, as you do more and listen to more, your taste is going to increase as well. And then when your taste rapidly outpaces where your ability is at, you know, it's probably, there are naturally going to be times where it plateaus. You know, that's where you're going to be like, oh man, my work is not good. I thought it was hot shit. I thought I was really sick before, but you know, now I'm really realizing how bad I am. And then this kind of ebbs and flows, kind of looks like DNA, right? Kind of ebbs and flows to where you have these lows and you have these highs. So at any given time, even if you're improving in your skills the entire time, throughout that range, depending on where your taste is at relative to your skill, you're gonna think, oh, I'm really good, or oh, maybe I'm not that great. So as far as being able to confidently say that you're good at it, it's different for everyone. I don't know if I think for me, I don't know if there's ever gonna be a threshold of accolades or achievements or like foundational game knowledge to where I can say, okay, I am a good commentator now and forever. I think I can confidently say that I'm good at commentary in the times when I am improving at a rate that I'm happy with. Actually, that doesn't sound particularly right? Because if I'm satisfied with my improvement, but I know that I'm not, you know, where I want to be, this is kind of how I feel like with uni, right? Like my improvement, I think is getting good and getting better, but you know, am I where I want to be on that foundational game knowledge? No. So what point can you confidently say that you're good at it? I think that depends on your confidence. And also your self-awareness of how much you have improved from where you started and where you are now. So it's however much you decide to accept as your threshold of how much do I need to have improved to be good. I think for me that threshold expands and it changes with my taste, but for some folks, you know, they don't want to, you know, they're not shooting for major top 8s. They're not shooting for, you know, these commentary spots at like invitational tours and shooting for the moon. You know, maybe they are fine with engaging their community, having commentary as kind of like a, you know, side or a dual pursuit while also playing, but they think that their commentary is, you know, good enough for the goals that they want to hit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about, it's relative to what you want. I wish I had a more concrete answer, but it's a difficult question. It's definitely a brain destroyer. Rysair is asking, I'm wondering if hand signals are effective in making transitions between commentators more natural. Also wondering if they're common practice in the FGC, because I see them behind the scenes in esports, but I wasn't sure what it was like in our kind of environment. So I'm a hand gesture enjoyer, as you guys can tell by me doing the fucking absolute cinema gesture every 5 minutes. But I think especially offline, you already have body language naturally being able to signal like when someone wants to say something or when they want to agree with you. But I think hand gestures are like so crucial in leading a lot of that body language, whether it's, you know, me pointing to my co-commentator and being like, yes, like that is That's bars. I like what you're saying. Like, keep going, because you have a good point going, and I got no reason or nothing that I want to interrupt you with. Versus, you know, maybe I'm doing something like this. I'm like saying, oh, pump the brakes, and then I point at our monitor. You know, I point at our view of the game, because there's something that either, you know, I want them to cut themselves off so I can explain, or I want them to shift their attention and be like, okay, I like what you're saying, but this is more important right now. Like, we have to know what just happened, or at least like stick a pin in it so we go back to it later, right? And obviously this is stuff that you can't do online. So when you have the opportunity to do it offline, it makes the handoffs like so much easier in so many ways. And I think the synergy between co-commentators is so much better when you don't have that extra layer of abstraction of, oh, okay, we're doing stuff online. I can't see what you're looking at or what you're looking like, whether you're leaning in or leaning back, if you want to continue your thought or not. And using hand gestures when you're offline is, you know, it's a privilege to have. It very much helps in this energy. All right, next question from MaidJumpy. How do I hype? How do I close a grand final or close sets? So, you know, she's saying that she leaves it on the table a lot because she doesn't know how to do it outside of saying, wow, that interaction was so cool, into some analytical breakdown, but it never feels enough to her. So how can she improve her reaction? And this was something that, especially after my first year of commentary, I thought very hard about. Because as I was gathering clips for my commentary reel, I was like, okay, I need to have analysis, I need to have a Maturino ad slide, I gotta have a good intro, and I should have some hype and like play-by-play energy, you know, shenanigans, right? Like that should be good. But, you know, as I was looking for those clips, I was able to find at least like 1 or 2 examples of every other category. But when I was looking for hype, I was very much realizing there was a big gap in my skill set there. Like, even for the big closers, I was like, oh, this person is gonna take it 3-0, let's go. But I was leaving so much on the table, right? Like, I was not raising my voice and my volume to commute the amount of excitement that I actually had. I was like, it sounded very much like my commentary was trying to, you know, keep things low for quiet hours during a dorm session or whatever, but, you know, it was something that I focused very heavy on, especially in my second year of commentary. And in terms of how to do it, like, you know, you see potentials for a set to end. You know, someone is 2-0 and now they're a round up, they're on set point. You kind of want to build up this like subconscious reaction of, oh, okay, if someone is 1 round away from winning, how am I going to describe this winning moment? You know, if they get the hit that's lethal and then the super animation plays out and you know it's gonna kill, what am I going to say when that actually happens? So that when it happens, you're not like, oh, they get the hit confirmed into the super, and then some awkward pause, and then you're like, oh man, yeah, so and so is gonna take the set 3-0, to the point where you sound surprised, right? It's okay, I was aware and I was primed that this is gonna be set point. So now what I'm saying is, oh man, it's the far M into the SSBA. It's a 2-hit confirmed for a clean 3-0. XYZ is going to be moving on to winner's side top 8. So we're going to be seeing them in a little bit. An amazing set from that, you know, without the commentary autopilot that I had towards the end there, right? But, you know, keeping in mind, what is the set score? Who are the players? What is this set going to qualify into, whether it's top 8 or even just staying alive another round in the loser's side? You know, maybe it's one set closer to a run back from earlier on in the bracket. It's so many of these things that you can prime in the back of your head that are very difficult to think of on the fly, but, you know, 5, 10, 25 seconds before, things to think about. And then obviously, you know, raising the volume and trying to bring that energy is a whole different thing. But knowing what you're going to say, I think, makes that so much easier instead of stumbling over your words and being like, oh, where did this qualify to? Maybe it's winner's side top 8. Which player took it again? What was the set score, etc. So set things up for yourself as needed. All right. Flokey asks, as more games come out, the chances to learn multiple titles and try to commentate them come about. My big question is, how do you split your time between multiple titles for commentary? Do you often see yourself leaning towards one or the other in terms of focus. I think for this, you know, especially if you have new games on the horizon and you have a repertoire of however many games that you already feel comfortable with and feel good in your commentary for. Again, it's kind of thinking from that beginner aspect as well, like we mentioned earlier. I think learning 2 games like actively at max is at least the most that I can do. You know, for me, it was Uni and Granblue. And as far as learning them, like learning multiple titles, I think taking it in phases ends up being a lot more helpful than trying to, you know, go 100% in both lanes, you know, and splitting your focus that way. I think setting aside a period of time to actively focus on one game, for example, like, oh, I'm going to spend the next 2-3 weeks, the next month or so on Uni, and, you know, I'll keep up Granblue a little bit on the side, right? Like, I'll scroll Twitter and see some results. Maybe I'll watch a top 8, you know, here and there just to stay updated with the scene. But as far as playtime, as far as asking players questions, as far as digging more and more into, you know, what matters about the game, how these matchup dynamics work out, I think it's much better to set aside specific phases for one game, which, you know, builds out more analogies, builds out more knowledge for you. And then when you hop back over to the other game, you know, you're not splitting your attention, you can focus 100%. And also you just have more analogies and examples to draw from other genres and examples, so that, you know, next time you see a situation, it's not, oh, this is the first time I'm explaining something like this, or the first time that, you know, I'm trying to understand all the options that can be going on here. You're like, oh, this is similar to this interaction in this other game that I'm very familiar with, right? So I would say live your commentary learning life in seasons, and you will benefit. All right. Question from Cal. I want to say Cal is part of the Canada scene. I forget which region in particular, but his question is, any tips on alleviating a solitaire commentary style when you're from a small scene and mostly commentate alone? It'd be greatly appreciated. This is not something that I really run into, but it is kind of something that I'm doing now with streaming, right? It's, you know, how do we talk in an entertaining way? Oh, wait, actually, it is something that I'm doing now, right? But he's asking for tips on alleviating this solo commentary style when you work with someone. So if you're used to commentating alone, how do you work better with another person? And I think this is, you know, the answer is very similar to, oh, how do I develop more rapport with my co-commentator? How do I, you know, stop cutting them off or stop getting cut off by them? You know, you build up a cadence. You want to have, like, finish your thoughts clearly, have strong handoffs, you know, ask them questions directly, and just, like, remember, okay, we can make this a conversation, right? We can make this, you know, a back and forth rather than I speak, then you speak, then I speak, and they happen to be like 2 separate streams of information that happen to be taking turns with each other. It's like, no, you know, oh, this thing happened. Yeah, Cal, you're right. Like, oh my God, I didn't think that was going to do so much damage. Like, you know, ask a question, like, what would you ask? Like, I'll blank it out. I mean, I guess it is a good question, right? Because I'm blanking out on figuring out an answer on my end over here too. But, you know, asking questions, you know, especially during downtime as well. Like, oh, how do you think this is going to end up for our players? Or do you have any, you know, favorites to take it all home for today at XYZ made up bracket number 99? You know, and building up rapport that way, where you make your co-commentator a little bit more comfortable and get yourself used to that back and forth by making it a little bit easier to tell when you want to contribute. So hopefully that helps. Oh my God, T-Spin gave me like 5 questions, man. I was like, holy shit. But they're good questions. How much knowledge do you need before commentating? You don't need to know everything before you go into commentary. Like, obviously I don't, and there's so much more that I want to learn. But I think you should know basic archetypes of the cast of characters. So this person is more so like a zoner. This person is like a big body grappler. This is kind of our all-around Shoto. You know, even if it's not like 100% accurate and you're missing out on the nuances, just knowing the general archetypes I think is very helpful. And knowing system mechanics as well, right? Like you should not be confused about the difference between red RC and purple RC and YRC, right? This is stuff you should know before heading onto the mic. Matchup dynamics and, you know, particular setups, you kind of learn with time, admittedly. Like, especially if it's a really common setup, you'll probably just see it so often that you will learn it through osmosis. But yeah, system mechanics and basic character archetypes, I think, are the biggest things. How do you know when to talk? It's hard. You got to be able to lock in and get a feel for your co-commentator's cadence. If they are constantly tripping you up or kind of changing up how that cadence is, especially without giving you clear handoffs of when their thoughts are ending, then it can be really rough. But especially in those situations, you can kind of take the reins and set a good example by doing what you want them to show, right? Like having your own good handoffs, like asking them particular questions, ending your thoughts clearly, and then hopefully they take the hint, if you know what I'm saying. What can be transferred from commentating one game to another? It's a great question. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, you know, in learning other games. You kind of learn like, okay, what are these archetypes like? What is zoner versus grappler usually? And how does that, you know, play out in the middle of the match? And then you have that example, you kind of bring it into another game. And even if it's not one-to-one, you kind of have these fundamentals to work with and build off of as well. You know, certain RPS interactions or situations, you can say, oh, this is similar, or you don't need to make cross-game references every single time you see something that kind of makes sense. And, you know, I think that can actually be bothersome, especially if you overdo it on the mic. But, yeah, having a better library of interactions and, like, you know, solved quote-unquote situations to draw from, I think makes learning similar situations, even in different games, so much easier because you already have something, this like template to base it off of. Yeah, and I think like in general, like the commentary soft skills of like hosting, hyping up moments, you know, matcherino shills, etc. Those are very similar from game to game, at least within the FGC, right? Like maybe tournament and bracket rules are very, very different outside and otherwise, but you know, between different fighting games, like those are carryoverable skills, or transferable skills rather. What do you need to do to commentate big events? I mean, we were talking about how to get EVO top 6 earlier, and obviously there's very, very many things that go into it, but as far as what is in your control, it is best to think of it simply as I need to be the best candidate and market myself to as many seeing eyes as possible. So people know that I'm a commentator and people know that I am a good commentator. So, you know, get enough blocks to get enough reps in so that people know your name. And then between each of those blocks, review, right? Like what went well, what do you need to improve on? And then spend the, you know, time between and then the next block actively focusing on improving on those things that you said you wanted to level up in. And if you do that enough, eventually you will be so good they can't ignore you. So that is my advice. What do I like about commentating? I like getting to yap. I like the sound of my own voice a little bit. But as a serious answer, I think part of what I love about commentating is just the fact that I have the opportunity to travel and go to a bunch of these different events where it's like, normally I would have no reason to spend my PTO to go to Chicago 3 or 4 times a year, to go to Florida, you know, 3 or 4 times a year, to go to Canada, Las Vegas, Seattle, you know, so many of these different places. But not only do I get to travel out to so many of these different places, spaces, and events, I get to meet so many of these folks, which obviously our main common interest is fighting games. But again, there are so many of them that I am close friends with now. And the thing that we talk about the most is, I don't know, good manga. Like we talk about rom-com mangas, or we talk about Uma Musume, or we talk about productivity or other things that are just entirely outside of the fighting game sphere. And I would not have met these people and these faces without the fighting games that were our common interest in the first place. So, and I probably wouldn't have met them were it not for me commentating and having a reason to go out to that fighting game space as well. So, what I like about commentating is the people that I get to meet. It's pretty sick. All right, next question. SpicyFetus asks, I saw a video of James Chen commentating Tetris and I thought it was cool. What are other places you can bring your commentary skills over to? Guys, I know this is the Uma Musume brain rot talking, but if I ever got to commentate a real life horse race, like, that shit would be so sick. I don't know a lot about horse racing. Like, IRL, my knowledge is quite far behind. I don't know a lot about the pedigrees, and even just watching like a single horse race, I'm like, holy shit, why do you know all that? Like, that's insane. But that would be a fun, thing to cross off the bucket list. Outside of that, I don't know. Nothing really comes to mind, to be honest. I guess commentary skills is also just like public speaking in general, but outside of being like a motivational speaker, I guess, like, oh, get up, make your bed, the world is your oyster. If you put your mind to it, you can do anything. Like, outside of that, not much I can think of. All right, AndyR asks, hello there. As someone who is brand new to commentary and a big fan, I've been dying to ask you, how can you loosen up on commentary while still focusing on the match? I want to inform and entertain viewers without talking too much and being too stiff. And this is something that I've been working on, especially this past year. I don't know. There's a balance of, oh, this guy is, he's not focusing on the game. He's just goofing off. He's telling random stories. Like, focus on the game in front of you. And then there's also, oh, this guy is so serious. Like, he's, so uptight. There's like funny shenanigans going on, but all they're doing is talking about the game and the interactions. Like, where's the personality behind it as well? I think if you know that you are on one extreme of that spectrum or the other, like, making it a point during your commentary blocks to be like, okay, if I'm feeling a little bit too stiff or uptight, how can I be a little bit more silly or freeform? How can I, take a jab at, someone's play style in a very lighthearted and non-offensive way? Like, how can I, what do I like about this game? Like, oh, can I just say, man, this super animation is sick? Or like, oh, wow, that's crazy. You can tell that I'm still learning because I don't have a great answer for this one as far as loosening up, but remember that you are also there on the mic to have a conversation with your co-commentator, and let that conversational view of what you're doing guide the whimsy with which you treat things, right? Like, yes, you can take commentary seriously. It's a great way to increase your public speaking skills and your storytelling skills and make networking connections in the FGC, but it's also, you're talking about your favorite video games with somebody else on the mic. Like, have some fun. All right. RiverHamon asks, something good to address is how to get a feel of when to take pauses for the other commentator, or what are good transitions to your fellow commentator, and also how to properly insert ad-libs when your commentator is speaking without speaking over them. So I have like an old commentary doc about hit confirming commentary, and I think it's a bunch of clips of me and James Chen at Frosty Faustings. So we're doing Strive, and I think we're both pretty high energy commentators is how I would describe it. But obviously I'm not trying to like step on his toes and cut him off every time I want to say something. But I'm also not 100% sure when he's done with his thought. So kind of going for these conversational jabs of like, oh, yo, or like, ooh, some of these like, I don't know, single syllable cut-ins, right? Can be, low committal ways of checking if your co-commentator is done. And then if they stop speaking, then you lead into your thought. But, if they continue their thought, it's just a single syllable that sounds like it's more supporting or giving a little bit of like background noise, I guess, to your co-commentator, rather than, you know, immediately going into your thought and risking, you know, just gambling 100%, you know, kind of mashing out, quote unquote, on your co-commentator's block string pressure, if that makes sense. So, you know, knock on the door a little bit almost with it, you know, just throw out some of these single syllable noises, I guess, and then go from there. At the very least, if your co-commentator keeps going, at least they know that, one, you're actively listening, and two, oh, maybe they're trying to cut in. Maybe there's something they want to say. Let me wrap up my thought so that they can go next. What are good transitions to your fellow commentator? I mean, you can use their name. You can be like, oh, James, wow, that was an incredible exchange. You know, you can ask them direct questions like, you know, how are we feeling about these contenders for top 8 or whatever. Yeah, there's a bunch of good ways to do it. Questions, using their name, and in general, just like ending your sentence in a way that sounds like you are done with your thought, and then taking a significant or like noticeable pause is very good. So hopefully that helps. How do you study for commentary? And what are things to avoid, or most of the mistakes a beginner should avoid doing in commentary? As far as studying, I think like watching other commentators really helps, you know, kind of understand the vernacular and the lexicon of how people look at things or call things, like common move names or like certain situations or system mechanics that have community accepted nicknames, you know, and kind of absorbing that lexicon through osmosis. Playing the game yourself is obviously very important. You know, there's only so much that you can say from an outsider point of view. And sometimes, you know, a lot of people risk themselves becoming quote unquote dust loop commentators, right? Where they kind of commentate in theory, but they don't understand the mental stack and all the other things that are being represented that make a quote unquote solved decision more difficult to do in practice than in theory. Yeah, so playing the game really helps. And also just like asking people about things that you don't understand, right? Like as you watch tournament footage or play games yourself, like you are building up the knowledge and knowledge and skills by asking people about the things that you don't understand. And also for studying commentary, like figuring out player history over time, whether that's through asking people about it or again watching VODs to try and, you know, catch up on the tournament history of other folks, like very helpful. As far as beginner mistakes, I don't know, it's always such a hard question to answer because people might be on one side of a spectrum of errors and then one side or on the other side. So it's like, oh, maybe this person is yelling too much into the mic, or maybe they're so quiet and their voice and energy is so monotone. It's hard to boil it down to, you know, this is what everybody should do. But, you know, balancing out your energy for appropriate times. What else? Things people should avoid doing in commentary. I mean, depending on the situation, generally you want to avoid profanity as well. Obviously at like locals or you're just like chilling out with people, like it's really not that big of a deal if you drop an F-bomb here or there. But especially for like if you're hired for commentary, it's probably best to err on the side of caution. Or if you're, you know, on somebody else's like net play or, you know, local, like be polite, you know, and if they tell you have a little bit more room to be a little bit more raunchy, then that's fine. But, you know, err on the side of caution there. Other mistakes? Again, it's another spectrum issue, right? Where it's like some beginner commentators study the game so much and they don't make time to actually commentate. So by the time that they're actually on the mic, right, they just haven't put in enough reps, so they get super nervous and they're not able to get their thoughts out in the way that they'd like to. But there are other folks who, you know, focus so much on building up how many amount of commentary blocks they've done that they're not focusing on reviewing in between them. So you can kind of see and hear them plateau because they're so focused on, oh, I need to do 2, 3, 4 events per week. And they just have no time to think about, okay, how can I improve as a commentator? How can I get more knowledge so that I can describe the situation more accurately or understand better? How can I just become a better speaker overall? Think you can be too overly analytical to an extent? Yeah, exactly. This is I think that's a common mistake, especially for high-level players that end up swapping into commentary. It's very easy to get lost in the sauce of explaining, oh, here's the situation, but X can do Y, and then Y gets countered by Z. But you gotta remember about ABC, because that just flips the whole thing over on its head. And then you spend 30 seconds analyzing something that happened 5 minutes ago, and then, you know, you've missed 5 other crucial interactions that have happened on the screen. So the ability to cut yourself off and be more concise, you know, with your commentary, I think is really important. Yoast tagged the homie, but I don't think they were actually. Oh wait, they did. Okay, never mind. This is AndyR. Top 3 Uma Musume. This has nothing to do with commentary. That being said, it is Special Week, Meijiro McQueen, and Narita Top Road. I wanted to put Buena Vista in top 3, but admittedly, I don't know anything about her personality other than that she is Special Week's daughter. So it feels wrong to have her in top 3, but she is also one of my favorite character designs in all of Uma Musume. And also every time she pops up on my feed, I'm like, all right, my day is so much better. So top 5 minimum. And Manhattan Cafe is also sick. Fellow coffee addict. Yeah, we have a question from Mako FGC that is, how do I do commentary better? This is quite vague, admittedly, but as far as general tips, what do I give to someone? It's like, oh, how do I improve my commentary? Review your blocks. Give yourself enough time in between your blocks to think, okay, what did I do well? What do I need to improve on? And how am I going to study up or practice so that I am better on those areas of improvement for the next stream or broadcast? And then especially when you're on that next stream or broadcast, if you have the opportunity to, really focusing up on, you know, honing that skill while you're on camera or on the mic. For example, if you're like, oh man, I keep cutting off my co-commentator because they don't know my cadence, because my cadence is unclear and I keep, you know, giving poor handoffs, then you can practice thinking, oh, okay, how do I end my thoughts a little bit more clearly? How do I stop my sentence and then just let there be a pause after? And then for your next commentary block, you know, that's going to be the focus at the top of your mind. Like, oh, okay, I need to make sure that my co-comm feels confident cutting in. So let me end my sentences clearly, give them questions to, you know, kind of pass the baton, and then see how the synergy goes from there and if I've improved on it. I just started Uma. I like Special Week and Suzuka. They're pretty sick. Special Week, of course, is my favorite. Suzuka is also pretty sick. I just think of the gif where she's like pacing around her room, like a nervous little dude. Good evening, gamer. How's the stream been? It's been good. It's been I did not realize it's been 4 hours. We did the commentary tier list. We did some 2025 goal planning, and now we're going through this commentary thread here, which, you know, I thought we would be able to finish this one in an hour. It's now 6:40 and I gotta play uni at 7, and I don't know how many more responses we got out of 22. Okay, we're a decent amount through. How much more do we? Oh my goodness. I don't know why this got flagged as potentially offensive. I wish I could mark it as inoffensive, but yeah, we got some more. Okay, we gotta hurry up a little bit. 20 minutes. Few more questions. Not too bad. What's up, Trevoni? Hope you're doing well. All right. WyCry asks, how do you help yourself make the push into larger events and deal with the pressures involved? So kind of a two-parter here. Making the push into larger events, I mean, I think the answer is very similar to what I mentioned earlier. You know, oh, how do you break into regionals and majors? You have to improve your commentary and commentate more. So, you know, reach out to local TOs or online TOs to get your blocks, improve, you know, take note of what you want to improve in between your blocks. And then, of course, you also have to make your commentary reel. So I think I have a different guide on that somewhere on Twitter. If you look up from Jaytsu and then commentary reel, should be up there somewhere. But yeah, find your best highlights, and then send your applications. And then if you are continuing to improve and sending out your applications over time, eventually you will be good enough in talent selection's eyes to get a spot on a major. And then from there, you continue to improve and hopefully expand the amount of spots that you're able to get. And how do you deal with the pressures involved? I mean, I still get a little bit nervous between, or especially leading up to major blocks. As far as dealing with the pressure, like, prepare as best as you can. Make sure that your food, like your diet, your sleep, while you're at the major are good. Like, please do not stay up and only give yourself like 4 or 5 hours of sleep before your major block. Like, it will hurt your mental acuity in a way that's like, oh man, I didn't give my all on the commentary desk. I wonder why. It's like, you didn't give your brain time to rest and recover. And I speak from experience. This is not me, you know, speaking down and condescending. I know it from firsthand experience. So, but yeah, the pressures, I would never say 100% go away, but it's the experience that allows you the wherewithal, the confidence to know that, okay, I've been on this big stage before. Yes, I'm still going to be nervous, but I know that I can still do a good job. So being able to deal with those nerves gets easier and easier over time, but I don't think they ever fully disappear. Now, Francie is asking about commentary tongue twisters. Like, maybe I'll do more of these at some point, but let's see. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I was so close to a perfect first run. What the fuck? Close, but not quite. And we can, what else is there? There's like Irish wristwatch. I can't do it like 5 times fast. Irish wristwatch. I'm running out of breath. Jesus. Maybe I'll do some more of these at a later point. Zamir asking, it would be more geared to your own story, but one day I would love a video about how you progressed in commentary for Uni 2. Could help others figuring out how they should approach comms when learning a new game. I would have to think about this a little bit more, I think, because I'm still not 100% where I want to be for Uni commentary. Of course, I've like brought that up 10 times this stream. But in terms of learning, I think the process of it is determining, especially for the first few weeks or like the month, like, okay, do I like commentating this game? Or do I like this game at all, right? Like, how would I think of that? I think you have to ask yourself, do I enjoy playing this game? Right? Because playing the game is so much of how you're going to be learning certain situations as they come up, building up your knowledge from a first-person POV. So if you pick up a game and realize you don't like playing it, I think it's going to be very difficult to build up the knowledge that you need to do a good job commentating it. But if you find out that you like the game and you enjoy playing it, from there, your improvement as a player will probably have some carryover to commentary. But again, like, listening to VODs of accomplished commentators in your game. So again, figuring out that lexicon of how people call things, certain system mechanics, what we call certain moves, etc. You know, making sure to find opportunities, whether it's locals or, you know, smaller net play brackets, to get practice, you know, in training up in Uni or Grand Blue or whatever game you decide to pursue. And yeah, again, it always comes back to review and figure out where your weak points are, and then address those in between blocks. I think there's probably some more that I can talk about specifically with my Uni journey, and also like, you know, finding folks and community that you can ask questions to that can help you get caught up with the game, whether it's running sets or answering questions. Like, I think, you know, there are a lot of folks in Uni who helped me when I was first trying to learn things, like Twang, of course, Rurik, who else? So many other folks that like I've gotten so much advice from and have broken down so many situations that I see so often but didn't understand intuitively. So finding that community or those people who can help you bridge those gaps is very important. But I would like to talk about this a little bit more in depth as its own separate video. If you're a long-time competitor of the game, asks Rachel slash Deyvonn, what's a good starting point to create a fun commentary that goes beyond just deep knowledge of the game? It's easy to talk about the things you know or the strategy meta, but I want to break out of that shell. So I think someone was talking about this a little earlier in chat, right? Like, how do you stop being too analytical on the mic? I think, learning more concise ways of how to talk about the things that you know and understand is something that comes with reps, time, and practice on the mic. So that will just come with more experience, right? Like being able to fit it in a shorter amount of time so that you can still talk about the play-by-play that's happening on the screen while not losing so much depth. But also remembering that, like, again, commentary is a conversation. You're there with another co-comm, you're talking about one of your favorite games, like, you can stand to be a little goofy, like make a, lighthearted joke at somebody's expense. If you're a high-level player, you probably know a lot about your scene, right? So especially if you're doing stuff like locals, it's, oh, this person swats back and forth between this character, now they're a little bit more settled, this is this person's play style, so I'm really excited to see how it clashes against, so-and-so. You can talk a little bit about, player lore that has nothing to do with the game. Like, dude, I can't believe this guy hates ube ice cream. Like, what a bastard. I'm cheering for his downfall. Things that can be a little bit sillier, right? Just talk about things outside of the game. They swap over to the player cam and you're like, does that guy have a Bowser backpack? Like, that's crazy. Like, open your vision, open your gaze to things that are not necessarily just the strategy and decision making of the game, which of course is a really strong base, but you want to be able to mix it in with being a little bit more silly. So it comes with time, comes with active practice, and something that I had to work on too. All right, Aerodat asks, how do you move away from simply doing play-by-play and adding more narration and context to a set? So for example, player history, matchup dynamics, patch changes, etc., while also making it flow naturally during your own speech and conversation with the co-commentator. This is hard. I mean, first, obviously you have to have that knowledge, so reaching out, asking, actively playing your game is going to build up that knowledge of the history, of the matchup dynamics, etc. And once you have that stocked up in your head, the question that you're... I'm so burpy today, I'm sorry. I blame the dragon fruit protein shake. But once you have that knowledge stocked up, that's where your question is, how do I weave it properly in my play-by-play and with my banter with the co-commentator? I think, just try to focus on bringing it up more. And again, at first, it's not going to be super concise. You're going to be like, oh, this person has I guess you could call it, questionable track record against this character, this champion, whatever. You're kind of stumbling over your words, right? But then as you do it the third time, the fifth time, the 10th time, you say something closer to, yeah, XYZ player has a lot of trouble against Mika. I think they play a little bit too aggressive in situations where they should be a little bit more passive, and then vice versa, right? But it seems like they've been really training up the matchup, so I'm excited to see, how that training, how a lot of that lab time ends up going for them in this next set. You train to be more concise by practicing, and you can't practice without doing it, right? So there are going to be situations where you're like, oh, I'm meandering, I'm tripping up over my words, but better that you do that, experiment, and then fail, rather than, like you're saying, stick around and play-by-play and go, oh man, there's more I could have added to this, but I was, shy or nervous to try and drop into, something a little bit more historical or knowledge-based without throwing off my co-commentator, right? So keep at it, and then it will become more concise over time, and you will be able to manage that with the synergy of your co-commentator. Who do I play in uni? I play Lene. She's fast. She's quite easy to pilot, so that's the commentator character, man. RoseWaltz asking, I'm curious, what mistakes and bad habits do new commentators fall into? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but just to kind of recap, right? Yelling into the mic or not having enough energy, bad handoffs are very common. Like, I was very much like this before. I would like frame chop someone. I would sound like I was ending my thought. And then shortly after small pause, I would continue back into it, and I would just throw my co-commentator off every single time of like, am I ending my thought? Is it their time to cut in, or am I gonna cut them off again, right? And then, the classic absolutely, like, you're listening, you're nodding along for 15 seconds, and then when you cut in, yeah, absolutely, man, I definitely agree with you. Like, to start off every thought, like, it's not a bad word in and of itself. It's not an expletive. Like, you'll be okay if you say it, but like with any crutch phrase, if you're using it just for the sake of filling time and as a transition that you're used to, it'll come off very repetitive. Late to the punch on this, but in online environments where you might not have access to VDO, familiarity with your co-comms, how do you find the space to stall out with your partner? Especially when you're starting sentences at the same time and the awkward shuffle. I think sometimes you just like gotta take the reins on it. You gotta commit to finishing your thought, even if you're gonna cut each other off. Like, such is life. It happens every so often, especially on Discord commentary, because again, there's that inevitable audio delay. But when you don't have that offline hand gesturing to kind of build off of, you need to set the example of doing good handoffs and your thoughts clearly, ask questions, and then hopefully your co-commentator takes the hint and then follows your lead. That's kind of how you build up that synergy, especially if you don't know them. That's what you got to do. All right, and finally, our last question of the day. We're coming up right on the hour mark, so perfect. Wabby Shores, or Raw Shore, asks, how do you try and read a room and hype it up? I guess it can depend on the venue or stream for sure, but I always think it's interesting the different ways some commentators bring in those moments. I think it would be nice to know some more tips on how to flow conversations better too. For hype, it's hard because every stream and venue is so different. Like, maybe you have the final block of the day where the entire arena or the venue is packed out and you have so many people, and maybe it's a little bit easier or more simple to hype them up, right? You go, all right, let's make some noise for grand finals, and you hear rah from behind the wall, and it's pretty straightforward in that aspect. But in terms of maybe you have 10 a.m. top 8, right? And not everybody woke up in time, that you don't have people waiting for the next top 8 to make a little bit of that energy. So thinking, oh man, should I ask them to make some noise? Like, are they going to be in the mood to do so? Like, do I want to do a cheer for like, oh, who's got it for player 1? Who's got it for player 2? Because there's also the consideration of like, you want the applause to like raise up. So you kind of want to put the underdog first and then the fan favorite second, and then kind of build up that kind of conflict or whatever. But how do you get better at it, and how do you gauge it? Like, you get better at it by trying. Sometimes your wording is like, you've chosen an awkward time for them to try and make some noise, or like you haven't said it in concise enough of a way that the audience thinks it's their turn to start cheering, and then you keep that in the back of your mind for next time. You're like, damn it, like I need to say it a little bit shorter and make it sound more like a command so that they know what's going on. You kind of learn with time. It's still something that I'm working on, so when I have a better answer, I'll answer this better. I think it would be nice to know some more tips on how to flow conversations better too. I mean, again, ask questions, be silly, and also earnestly listen, right? Because of course it's that back and forth as well. So try and avoid situations where it's like, blah, 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 I say something, blah, 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 blah. They cut in and they also say something, and then you detract, or like you say something entirely different, right? Like, earnestly listening and then, building off of their point, again, is so good for building commentator rapport, because it just shows them that like, okay, you're not just saying what you see on the screen and waiting for your turn to speak. You're also listening to me and making sure I'm included in this conversation. Easier said than done, but it definitely helps. But yeah, that is the that's the end of all the shenanigans we got going on here for the commentary questions. Again, thank you guys very much for tuning in and listening, and thank everybody in the replies here as well for giving me such good questions to try and rock through here. Again, there's so much that we learn on the commentary journey that it's pretty difficult to remember everything that we've learned on the way, but especially knowing what you guys find interesting about the behind the scenes or about the synergy of commentary or even about learning the craft as well, I think has been a good organizing exercise for my mind and how I think about a lot of these as well. So thanks a ton. My favorite Jaytsu moment will always be the Beatrix yell. That shit, it was inspired. It also killed my voice for Grand Blue top 8 the next day, in addition to a few other things. But, you know, man, like, I'm very glad I did that auction tournament. 1, for the experience, and 2, for, like, that shit was just fun, man. I can't believe no one wanted to buy fucking Jita. I was like, or no, they were trying to lowball Jita. I was like, dude, this is like her best version. She's full quarter carry from wherever. 2-1-4U is it's so good. You want to spend $200 on this character now? I think someone bought her, but it was probably for like 50. I was like, what?